Weak little warrior. Donald Trump sneers across the polished table, his voice dripping with scorn. You really think, Jasmine Crockett, that your tiny voice can challenge a system that's crushed over 200 whistleblowers, 17 major corruption scandals, and countless lives destroyed? He leans back, smirking as the cameras zoom in on her face. Jasmine's eyes blaze, unflinching. She knows the odds are stacked against her, but the world is watching, and justice is not just a word, it's a battle. For the next 40 seconds, every word, every gesture, every glare sets the stage for a confrontation that could shake the highest corridors of power in America. Jasmine Crockett stepped into the grand hall, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a war drum. Her eyes were alight with fire, scanning the room, daring anyone to underestimate her. Every whisper in the hall seemed to shrink under the weight of her presence. She had rehearsed this moment for months, yet the adrenaline surging through her veins made her pulse race with anticipation. This was not just another hearing, it was a battleground. From the far end of the hall, Donald Trump emerged, his golden tie catching the harsh overhead lights. A smug grin curled across his face, one hand raised in a mocking salute as if to belittle every ounce of authority Jasmine carried. "Do you really think you're ready to speak to me?" he sneered, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a whip. The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, designed to provoke, designed to intimidate. Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, a slow, calculating smile spread across her face. Her voice, calm but laced with steel, pierced the tension. "I've faced systems far more corrupt than you, Mr. Trump. Maybe it's time someone finally reminded you that power without accountability is nothing but a hollow echo." Gasps rippled through the audience. Some leaned forward in shock, others whispered, gripping their seats. The tension was palpable, almost unbearable. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the electric clash of gazes, Trump's eyes flickering with irritation, Jasmine's burning with determination. Every breath, every subtle movement became part of a silent duel, a choreography of conflict that had everyone in the room holding their collective breath. Trump waved dismissively, his smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Cute little words for a cute little fighter," he shot back, the words dripping with disdain. "Do you honestly think you can stand against decades of influence, networks of money and armies of loyalists?" Jasmine leaned slightly forward, her voice rising just enough to command attention without shouting. "Influence built on fear and lies never lasts forever. And as for loyalty, loyalty built on corruption is nothing but a chain that will eventually snap." The hall erupted. Journalists scribbled furiously, recording every syllable. The spectators, a mix of seasoned politicians and ordinary citizens, were captivated, caught in the whirlwind of this verbal battlefield. Some nodded in silent agreement, others sat frozen, unsure of what to expect next. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of awe, fear, and anticipation. Every heartbeat seemed synchronized with the clash unfolding at the center of the hall. Trump's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous hiss. "You're playing with fire, Jasmine. Do you even realize who you're facing?" "I do," she replied, unwavering. "And that's why I'm here, to make sure the truth doesn't burn alone." A tense silence followed. Then the room seemed to exhale as if acknowledging the weight of her words. The battle had officially begun. Not with fists, not with weapons, but with words sharper than knives, each one designed to wound, to expose, to dismantle. And as the first salvo of this war of words echoed through the hall, one thing became clear. Jasmine Crockett was no ordinary opponent. She was a force, a storm that refused to be tamed. If you want to witness every twist, every clash, every moment where justice fights back against corruption, make sure to subscribe to Harrison Stories, where the battles are real and the heroes are unforgettable. Trump's hand shot out, snatching the microphone with a sharp yank that made the crowd flinch. His voice boomed across the hall, filled with venom and authority. "You know nothing about politics, Jasmine Crockett. You think you're some kind of hero, parading around like you can change the world with a few words?" The hall trembled under the force of his proclamation. He slammed a folder onto the polished oak table, papers sliding with a crisp crack. Inside were documents carefully crafted to look like damning evidence. Allegations twisted, numbers manipulated, timelines distorted. Each sheet was a calculated blow, aimed to shatter Jasmine's credibility before she even spoke. Cameras swiveled, journalists leaned forward, and whispers rippled through the room like wildfire. Yet Jasmine's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't hesitation. It was the calm before a storm. Her fingers flexed slightly at her side, subtle but deliberate, as if readying for a fight that transcended the physical. She had anticipated this, expected every deceit, every theatrics. And now she would strike back, not with anger, but with precision. Trump, noticing the subtle shift in her demeanor, furrowed his brow. "Oh, don't give me that look," he sneered. "That little smirk won't save you when the entire system is against you. All of it, decades of influence, networks of money, loyalists ready to crush anyone who dares oppose me, are lined up behind me. You really think your words can stand?" The audience leaned in, sensing the escalating tension. Each eye followed Jasmine's every subtle movement. She opened her mouth but did not immediately respond. Instead, her gaze swept the room, acknowledging the watchers, the doubters, the hopefuls. She let a beat linger, long enough for the silence to sharpen like a knife, then spoke, her voice low, measured, yet filled with undeniable authority. "Decades of influence built on lies are fragile foundations," Jasmine began, each word deliberate, each pause punctuated with weight. "Networks of money? They crumble under scrutiny. Loyalists who follow out of fear? Fear is never stronger than truth. Mr. Trump, you have built a fortress of illusions, and I am here to dismantle it, one truth at a time." A ripple of murmurs cascaded through the room. Some leaned forward in awe, others blinked rapidly in disbelief. The air itself seemed charged, electric, as if the space between them had contracted, shrinking the hall to a tension-filled arena. Every journalist's lens captured the flicker of irritation in Trump's eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. He slammed a fist lightly on the table, the papers trembling beneath it. "Cute words, little warrior," he shot back, voice sharper, sharper than before, almost cracking under the effort to dominate. "Do you think the public will believe your dramatics? That your truths can survive scrutiny? The world doesn't care about justice, Jasmine. It cares about power, and I have it in spades." Jasmine's smile widened, sharper now like a blade catching the light. "Power without responsibility," she replied, her voice calm yet cutting, "is nothing more than tyranny dressed up in silk and gold. You may have spades, Mr. Trump, but truth is the wild card that wins against any deck." Gasps and whispers filled the hall. Some clutched their notebooks as if trying to anchor themselves to reality. Others exchanged quick glances, unsure if what they were witnessing was unprecedented courage or sheer recklessness. The cameras swiveled, capturing the clash in slow-motion detail. The twitch of a smirk, the flicker of an eyebrow, the tension radiating from two people poised at the precipice of confrontation. Trump leaned closer, lowering his voice into a hiss that was meant for Jasmine's ears only, though every microphone picked it up. "You think your little words can topple me? You think the public will side with someone naive enough to believe they can change centuries of control?" Jasmine's eyes locked with his, unwavering, fierce. "I don't need the public's permission to speak the truth," she said, her tone unwavering, almost serene. "And one day the world will remember that courage isn't measured by fear of consequence. It's measured by standing for what's right, even when the odds are impossible." For a moment silence reigned, heavy and oppressive. Then a murmur of acknowledgement swept through the room, subtle but undeniable. The clash had begun in earnest, not with violence, but with words sharp enough to cut, to challenge, to expose. Every glance, every intonation, every flicker of expression became part of a duel that gripped everyone present, binding them to the tension like spectators at a coliseum. And in that hall, under the glaring lights, with cameras trained and history watching, the first real sparks of the verbal battlefield ignited. Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump, locked in a duel where the only weapons were words, and the stakes were the soul of justice itself. Jasmine Crockett's eyes narrowed, a quiet storm gathering behind her calm exterior. She leaned slightly forward, voice steady but piercing, and let her words slice through the thick tension of the hall like sharpened knives. Donald Trump, she began, each syllable deliberate. You speak of power, but the truth is you've built your empire on corruption, deception, and countless lives ruined for your own gain. The room seemed to pause, every camera lens capturing the weight of her accusation. She held up a meticulously organized folder, evidence of financial malfeasance, manipulations, and betrayals that had been long buried. Numbers that didn't lie, contracts that exposed lies, and sworn statements that would make even the staunchest supporter wince. Over a decade, your schemes have defrauded hundreds, evaded the law at every turn, and manipulated the trust of millions, she continued, letting the words hang like thunderclouds. Do you deny that? Or have you convinced yourself that arrogance can rewrite history? Trump's face darkened, a vein pulsing at his temple. His hands shot up in a flurry, papers trembling in midair, as he tried to interject, his voice rising to a frantic roar. How dare you speak about me? Do you even understand the magnitude of what you're accusing? You're a fool if you think anyone will buy your lies. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she allowed a sly, measured smile to curl at the corner of her lips. Fool? She said, her tone sharp, slicing like a scalpel. History will judge, Mr. Trump. Not the fear you instill, not the wealth you hoard, not the theatrics you wield like weapons. The world remembers facts, evidence, and the courage to expose them. The hall erupted. Pens scratched furiously, microphones captured every inflection, and journalists leaned over each other, desperate not to miss a single word. The air was electric, alive with a tension that crackled like static before a storm. Spectators shifted in their seats, some mouths hanging open in awe, others exchanging incredulous glances as the reality of the confrontation hit them. This was more than a verbal battle. It was a reckoning. Trump's nostrils flared, his tone sharp as a whip. You think your tiny voice can undo decades of influence, money, and loyalty? You have no idea who you're standing against. I don't need to undo decades, Mr. Trump, Jasmine countered, her voice ringing clear and unwavering. I need only to shine a light on the truth. And the truth, she paused, letting her words resonate in every corner of the hall, is far heavier than your empire of illusions, far stronger than your threats, and far louder than your lies. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Reporters stopped typing mid-sentence, realizing that the story unfolding before them was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. On every screen broadcasting live, viewers leaned in closer, feeling the gravity of each statement. Comments and shares surged online as millions across the country experienced the clash in real time. It wasn't just politics. It was justice against tyranny, morality against manipulation, courage against fear. Trump's face turned crimson, his hand waving wildly as he tried to regain control, shouting insults that now sounded hollow, almost desperate. You don't understand. This is bigger than you, bigger than anyone. Jasmine's eyes burned brighter, and her voice, calm yet merciless, cut through the chaos like a bell-tolling judgment. I understand perfectly, Mr. Trump. Bigger than me doesn't mean untouchable. Bigger than truth doesn't exist. Bigger than justice? Never. The journalists were no longer scribbling. They were frozen, riveted. Spectators whispered, some trembling, some nodding, all caught in the gravity of the verbal onslaught. Every word Jasmine delivered carried weight, momentum, and an almost tangible force that seemed to press against the walls of the hall. Trump's fury escalated, his shouts echoing off the high ceilings, but it only made Jasmine's calm resolve shine brighter. She leaned in slightly, almost conspiratorially, as if addressing not just him, but the millions watching at home. You've spent your life building walls, Mr. Trump. Walls around truth, walls around justice, walls around yourself. But every wall has cracks. Every empire has a foundation, and every tyranny has a reckoning. The murmurs grew louder, the cameras zoomed closer, and the tension in the hall became almost unbearable. The duel of words had reached a new intensity, the clash of egos, ideals, and the very soul of justice itself. Each phrase Jasmine delivered landed like a hammer strike, exposing weakness, arrogance, and moral decay. And as the first salvo of her relentless verbal assault echoed across the hall, it became undeniable. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was a full-scale collision of truth and deception, courage and power, a battle that would etch itself into history. Through every word, every pause, and every piercing glance, Jasmine Crockett had turned the tide. For millions watching, it was no longer just a hearing. It was the fight for justice against the overwhelming force of corruption, and she had taken the first undeniable strike. But Trump wasn't finished, not even close. With a theatrical gesture, he slammed a thick binder onto the table, the sound echoing like a gavel across the hall. The cameras zoomed in as he pulled out a stack of glossy documents, stamped with bold red letters. Classified, top secret. He held them up high, eyes glinting with malice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he barked, his voice dripping with triumph, "I have here undeniable proof that Jasmine Crockett is nothing more than a fraud, a pawn, a pathetic pretender playing at justice." The audience gasped, the weight of those words crashing down like a hammer. He flipped through the pages, jabbing his finger at charts, signatures, and doctored memos. The sheer performance of it all, the swagger, the volume, the pounding fist, was enough to shake even seasoned politicians. "Do you see this?" he roared, veins bulging. "Connections with radicals, money funneling, secret agendas. This so-called warrior of justice is tangled in corruption deeper than anyone here dares to admit." He turned on his heel, eyes sweeping across the chamber like a predator stalking prey. "And if any of you think you can stand against me, remember this. I have files on every single one of you. Your careers, your scandals, your secrets. I can end them all with a single word." A silence spread through the room, cold and suffocating. Members of Jasmine's camp shifted uneasily in their seats. Some avoided eye contact, others whispered in hushed panic. The intimidation worked. Trump's shadow grew taller, stretching across allies and opponents alike. But Jasmine didn't move. She sat poised, hands folded, gaze steady as steel. The storm raged around her, yet she remained unshaken. Her stillness was its own defiance, louder than any outburst. Trump noticed. His voice rose, frantic and furious. "Look at her, sitting there like she's untouchable. Do you think your silence makes you strong, Crockett? No, it makes you weak. Weak, little warrior. You've already lost, and the sooner you realize it, the better." His words hit the chamber like shards of glass, cutting into the confidence of those around her. One senator leaned back, muttering, "Maybe this is too dangerous. Maybe she should back down." Another shifted nervously, clutching his papers tighter. The tide seemed to turn. The atmosphere thickened, unbearable. Fear coiled like smoke in the lungs of every onlooker. The question loomed unspoken but heavy. Who will break first? Trump, sensing the shift, pressed harder. He waved the evidence like a weapon, his every sentence a stab meant to wound Jasmine's credibility, her alliances, her very spirit. "This is my arena," he thundered. "You are in my house, and no one, not even you, dares to challenge the king." Yet Jasmine's composure held. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her gaze, her eyes locking onto Trump's with unwavering fire. For a brief moment, the noise seemed to fade. The shouting, the whispers, the camera clicks, all of it melted into silence. And in that silence, she smiled. It was not a smile of defeat, nor of fear. It was the kind of smile that promised something Trump wasn't expecting: patience, calculation, and an imminent counterstrike. The chamber buzzed with tension. Spectators leaned forward, breaths caught in their throats. Even Trump hesitated, his words faltering for the briefest second as he registered the defiance radiating from her expression. The duel had escalated into something primal, something bigger than political theater. It was a clash of intimidation against resilience, bluster against conviction, a predator testing its prey, only to find the prey was not so easily devoured. Every second stretched, taut and fragile. One wrong move, one faltering step, and the entire spectacle could collapse. The air seemed to whisper the question aloud. Who will yield first? The tyrant drunk on power, or the warrior who refuses to bow? The answer had not yet come, but the world was already watching, waiting, hearts pounding in unison. And as the standoff burned hotter, history itself leaned closer to witness which name would rise from the ashes. Before we continue to the next battle, remember, make sure to subscribe to Harrison Stories, where corruption is exposed, justice takes the stage, and every confrontation leaves you breathless. The silence after Trump's thunderous performance was heavy, suffocating. His top-secret folder still lay open on the desk, its forged contents scattered like shattered glass across the hearing room. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't trembling. She wasn't shifting in her seat like the politicians around her. She was waiting, and then she struck. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the air. "If this chamber is going to deal in documents, let's put aside your theater and bring forward the truth." Her hand swept across her own folder, sleek, black, unmistakably authoritative. The moment she placed it on the desk, the camera zoomed in instinctively. Reporters rose halfway from their seats, sensing history was about to unfold. She opened it with deliberate calm, and what spilled out wasn't noise, wasn't fabrication. It was raw, undeniable fact. "Here," Jasmine announced, holding up the first page, "direct wire transfers over 32 separate instances from your campaign accounts into shell companies traced to offshore banks. And every transfer timed precisely before key indictments or investigations." A collective gasp swept the hall. The papers trembled in Trump's hands as he tried to snatch the spotlight back, his mouth already opening to shout. But Jasmine wasn't finished. "Here," she continued, flipping to another page. "Audio recordings. Your voice. Ordering subordinates to bury evidence. Threatening whistleblowers. Words you cannot spin, cannot deny, cannot erase." The hall detonated. Reporters nearly fell over one another to catch the words. Flashes exploded like fireworks. Trump froze, color draining from his face before surging back in a furious red. "Lies!" he bellowed, his fist slamming against the table. "Aruan, all of it lies, fabricated garbage." But the crack in his voice betrayed him. The bravado sounded thin now, desperate. Jasmine let the silence swallow his denial before speaking again, her tone firm, merciless. "Deny it all you want, but the signatures match. The testimony of your own financial officer aligns perfectly with these documents. Every line, every trail leads back to your desk." A shudder rippled through Trump's allies. One clutched his tie, sweat running down his temple. Another whispered frantically to an aide, eyes darting toward the exits. For the first time in the hearing, the strength of his camp faltered. The gallery erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, cheers of vindication, and cries of outrage. Across the nation, televisions blared as millions of Americans leaned closer, their pulses quickening. Hashtags streaked across screens. Crockett strikes, Chakitak, truth exposed, Cha-cha, justice on trial. And yet, in the middle of the storm, Jasmine stood unmoved. Her gaze locked on Trump, steady as a blade. "You've built walls your entire life, Mr. Trump," she said, voice carrying above the uproar. "Walls of money, walls of fear, walls of lies. But every wall has cracks, and tonight, those cracks are collapsing." Trump lurched forward, his finger stabbing the air at her, his roar echoing. "You think this means anything? Nothing. You're finished, Crockett. Finished." But his words no longer filled the room. They fell, brittle, drowned out by the rising swell of voices and the undeniable gravity of evidence. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply let the truth speak for itself. And in that moment, the power dynamic flipped. Trump, the man who had walked in with a smirk and a shadow that loomed over the chamber, now looked cornered, smaller, his rage reduced to noise. Jasmine Crockett had turned the hearing into a battlefield, and with a single calculated strike, she had seized control of the war. But Trump was not a man to retreat. Not now, not ever. He rose from his seat in one violent motion, the chair screeching across the floor like nails on steel. Jasmine stood at the same time, slow and deliberate, her eyes never leaving his. For the first time that night, both of them were on their feet. Two titans in direct collision, locked in a stare that could cut through stone. The room fell into a hush. Cameras zoomed in. The air tightened. And then Trump roared. "You think you can shame me?" His finger jabbed the air like a dagger. "You, Jasmine Crockett, what are you, really? A second-rate lawyer from nowhere. A nobody pretending to be a hero. Your family wouldn't even recognize the person you've become. You talk about justice? Please. Your name will rot in the same ditch as every failed politician who thought they could touch me." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The attack was brutal, personal, slicing deeper than politics. But Jasmine didn't blink. "My family," she said evenly, her voice carrying a razor's calm, "taught me to fight for something bigger than myself. That's why I'm standing here while you hide behind money and lies. You mock where I come from? That only proves how far removed you are from the people you claim to represent." Trump laughed harshly, a bark of scorn. "Spare me the hallmark speech. You're nothing but a puppet for the establishment. They prop you up, feed you talking points, and you dance like a good little soldier. You think you're clever? You're just their mouthpiece. Louder, yes, but empty inside." The words cut, but Jasmine's reply came sharper, quicker. "Empty? You dare accuse me of emptiness when your entire empire is built on fraud, on lies, on pretense? You think shouting makes you strong? No, it makes you small, because when the facts stand against you, all you have left is noise." The audience erupted, some cheering, others shouting, the tension snapping like live wires. Trump leaned closer across the table, his face twisted with fury. "Facts? Let's talk facts. Fact. You've accomplished nothing in Congress. Fact. You ride on headlines that only exist because of me. Without my name, you're invisible. You feed off me like a parasite and then pretend you're the hunter." Jasmine's eyes narrowed, the fire behind them unshakable. "You're right about one thing. You are the headline, but not because of strength, because of scandal, because of corruption, because of every law you've bent, every truth you've strangled. I don't feed off you, Mr. Trump. I expose you. And the difference is the reason you're trembling right now." The crowd roared. Journalists scribbled furiously, trying to keep pace with the torrent of fire in the room. Trump slammed his palm against the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Trembling?" His voice cracked with rage. "You're delusional. I've built towers that touch the sky. I've sat in the Oval Office. I've commanded armies and economies. Who the hell are you compared to me?" Jasmine didn't flinch. Her reply was quiet, almost too quiet, forcing the room to lean in. "I am the voice you can't silence, the mirror you can't shatter. And tonight, I am the reckoning you cannot escape." The hall erupted again. Cheers, shouts, the thunder of 1,000 voices colliding. The very walls seemed to tremble with the force of it. But Trump wasn't finished. His voice cracked into a shout, spitting venom. "You think you're clever, Crockett? Let's talk about your past. The cases you lost, the deals you failed, the donors who pulled away. You've stumbled every step of the way, and now you stand here acting like some savior? You're a fraud, Jasmine, just like every other weak little wannabe that tried to climb over me." For a heartbeat, the words hung heavy. The smear was brutal, designed to humiliate. But Jasmine only smiled. It was small, steady, unshakably confident. "You can dig through my past all you want. You'll find mistakes. You'll find failures. Because I'm human. But do you know what else you'll find? Growth, resilience, and the kind of strength that doesn't crumble under pressure." She leaned forward, her gaze unblinking, cutting straight through him. "Can you say the same, Mr. Trump? Or will history remember you only as the man who shouted the loudest before it all came crashing down?" The words hit like a sledgehammer. The chamber shook, not from sound, but from the weight of a truth too sharp to ignore. Trump's mouth opened, but for once no words came. Just rage, just silence, just the raw, exposed wound of pride pierced too deep. The duel had gone beyond politics. It was now something primal. Two figures locked in a war of souls, their voices weapons, their truths colliding. Every spectator in the hall knew they weren't just watching a hearing, they were witnessing history rip itself open. And the tension, thick, searing, unbearable, was far from over. Trump's face reddened to a dangerous hue, the veins at his temples bulging as if his fury could no longer be contained by flesh. He grabbed the microphone with both hands, his knuckles whitening, and then in a sudden, violent motion, he ripped it from its stand and hurled it onto the table with a thunderous clash. The hall gasped. He roared, his voice shaking the chamber. "You think you've cornered me, Crockett? You're nothing but a rookie, a clumsy amateur playing in a league you don't belong in. You're a hand-me-down politician, a loudmouth with no power, no respect, and no chance against me." The words thundered across the room like cannon fire. Some in the audience flinched. Others cheered, feeding off his rage, swept into the storm of his wrath. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her lips curled into a smirk so sharp it sliced through his fury. "A rookie?" Her voice, steady and dripping with disdain, carried easily above the noise. "If standing up for truth makes me a rookie, then I'll wear that title proudly. Because at least I'm not a hypocrite, a man who preaches about greatness while drowning in greed. At least I'm not a hollow shell dressed up in power, screaming for attention because the silence of truth terrifies me." The words struck like whiplash. The crowd shuddered. Trump slammed his fist on the desk, rattling glasses of water, sending papers scattering like fallen leaves. His voice cracked into a shriek, raw and furious. "How dare you?" His body leaned forward, looming, desperate to dominate. "You dare call me a hypocrite? I built this country's success. I am its strength. Without me, America is nothing. And you're just a parasite feeding off my legacy." Jasmine's laugh rang out, low, cutting, devastating. "Your legacy?" She tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with a merciless fire. "Your legacy is debt, lies, scandals, a trail of broken promises and broken people. You don't build, Mr. Trump. You consume. You drain. You take until there's nothing left. That's not legacy. That's greed without end." The insult detonated like dynamite. Trump's hands shook. He grabbed the fallen microphone, clutched it to his lips, his voice now a jagged growl. "You think anyone believes you? You think the American people will side with some no-name congresswoman over me? Look at me. Look at what I've done. Towers, deals, the White House itself. I am power, and you're just a background noise that will be forgotten tomorrow." But Jasmine was faster, her voice slicing through his rant like lightning. "Forgotten?" Her tone dripped with mockery. "The only thing people will forget is your lies once they've seen the truth. You keep shouting about towers and wealth, but the higher you build your lies, the harder you will fall. And tonight, everyone here is watching the cracks appear." The chamber shook with applause from her side, countered by chants and shouts from his. It was chaos, a storm. Journalists scrambled, their cameras clicking frantically, as though trying to capture history as it burned alive in front of them. Senators whispered, some ducking their heads in shock, others leaning forward with morbid fascination. The hearing had dissolved into a battlefield of raw fury. Trump, now trembling with rage, raised a finger, jabbing it toward Jasmine like an executioner's blade. His voice rose to a screech, feral and unrestrained. "You're finished, Crockett. Finished. No one crosses me and survives. I'll drag your name through every headline, crush you in every court, bury your career so deep not even history will remember you." The words were venom, poison meant to paralyze. But Jasmine stood unyielding, her gaze steady, her voice calm, a calm so sharp it was deadlier than any shout. "Go ahead, threaten, scream, break every microphone in this room. That's all you have left. Because deep down, you know you've already lost. You've lost to truth, to justice, and worst of all, you've lost control." The silence after her words was deafening. Even Trump froze for a moment, his chest heaving, his face twisted in a mask of disbelief and unbridled fury. And then the hall erupted. Shouts, cheers, boos, applause. The very air quivered, as if the walls themselves might crumble under the weight of the clash. People were no longer watching a hearing. They were caught in the heart of a storm, where words were weapons, pride was armor, and every sentence cut like steel. Trump and Jasmine stood locked in their war, two unrelenting forces refusing to bow. And as the crowd screamed, as the cameras flashed, as history burned into the walls, one truth was undeniable. This was no longer politics. It was war. But Jasmine Crockett had not stepped into this battlefield unarmed. She had saved her most devastating weapon for the moment when Trump believed himself untouchable. When his voice, his rage, his theatrics had filled the chamber like smoke. Now she cut through that smoke with fire. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for a folder resting at the edge of her desk. The chamber hushed instinctively, as though every heart recognized that something irreversible was about to unfold. Even the cameras seemed to lean closer, lenses zooming in, desperate to capture the tremor in her hands, or perhaps the unshakable certainty in her eyes. Trump's glare narrowed, his lips twisted into a sneer. "What now, Crockett? Another fairy tale? Another desperate little stunt to grab headlines?" Jasmine didn't look at him. Her fingers slid across the folder's edge, opening it with precision, revealing a stack of documents so thick the weight of them made the table groan. She lifted the first page high for all to see. "This," she declared, her voice ringing clear as a bell, "is not a headline. This is truth. Truth buried, silenced, hidden behind your walls of money and manipulation. But walls can crack, and tonight, Mr. Trump, they have shattered." Gas rippled through the room. On the screen behind her, words and numbers began to appear. Bank transfers, signed deals, communications laced with corruption. Each document projected for the world to witness. Jasmine's voice was relentless, slicing with every syllable. "Here is the money funneled through shadow accounts. Here are the contracts signed under false pretenses. Here are the victims, ordinary Americans, cheated while you fattened your empire. This is not speculation. This is not theater. This is evidence, signed and sealed." The chamber quaked with noise, reporters shouting into phones, politicians shifting uneasily in their seats, allies and enemies alike shaken by the avalanche of truth. And Donald Trump, who had roared, who had cursed, who had thrown his fury like thunderbolts, stood frozen, his jaw clenched. His hands trembled on the desk. The red flush drained from his cheeks, leaving a pallor that betrayed what his voice could not admit. Still he tried. His words stumbled, brittle, desperate. "Fake. It's fake. These are lies, manufactured garbage. You think anyone's going to believe this pile of paper? You think—" But Jasmine cut him off, her tone merciless. "Don't waste your breath denying it. Every number has a source. Every signature has been verified. Every thread leads back. To you. To your office. To your decisions. This isn't a witch hunt, Mr. Trump. It's the reckoning you've spent years running from." Her words slammed into him like hammer blows. The audience could feel it. The shift in power, the collapse of the empire of bluster and intimidation he had built around himself. Every protest he tried to mount wilted beneath the relentless flood of facts Jasmine unleashed. Page after page, strike after strike. "Here," she said, brandishing another document, "your personal authorization for a deal that siphoned millions meant for relief funds into private pockets. Here, your associates laundering donations while communities starved. Here, your direct order to silence whistleblowers under threat." Each revelation landed like a blade, sharp and unyielding. Trump gripped the desk so tightly his knuckles blanched. His lips moved, but no sound came. For the first time, Donald Trump, the man who could outshout storms, was speechless. The silence was louder than any outburst. Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists scrambled, voices cracking with disbelief as they relayed the bombshells exploding before their eyes. Senators shifted, some sinking into their seats in shame, others stealing glances at Trump, as though watching a monument crumble to dust. And Jasmine, she did not relent. Her eyes locked on him, unwavering. Her voice, steady, merciless, filled every corner of the chamber. "You call me a weak little warrior, but tonight it is you who trembles. You who hides behind rage because truth has stripped you bare. Look around you. Your allies have no words. Your empire has no shield. And your lies, your endless, poisonous lies, have finally collapsed under the weight of justice. Trump's lips parted as if to scream, but nothing emerged. Only a low, broken sound, swallowed by the roar of the crowd. For the opposition, silence. For the press, frenzy. For Trump himself, ruin. Jasmine lowered the final page, her voice soft now, almost solemn. This is not about me. This is about every American who has suffered under corruption and deceit. Tonight, we all see the truth, and no power, no money, no threat can erase it. The chamber fell still. Even the chants and cheers faded into reverent quiet. In that silence, Donald Trump stood trembling, not the giant he claimed to be, but a man cornered, exposed, dismantled piece by piece. And Jasmine Crockett, calm and unbroken, stood victorious, her every word echoing like a verdict in the Hall of Justice. But Donald Trump was not a man to surrender quietly. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched so hard it seemed his teeth might shatter. And then he erupted. "You think this is victory?" he bellowed, his voice ragged, the fury spilling out like lava. "You're nothing but a liar in lipstick, a fraud, a puppet for people who don't even know your name. You think you can challenge me? I am the President of the United States. Without me, this country collapses." The words cracked across the chamber like a whip, sharp and venomous. But Jasmine didn't blink. She stepped forward, her heels striking the floor like drum beats of war. Her voice, cold and clear, sliced through his roar. "President or not, you are still accountable. Your title doesn't shield you from the truth. Power without integrity is nothing but a costume, and you've worn that disguise long enough." The crowd erupted in gasps, some in awe, others in outrage. Trump slammed a fist into the table, papers scattering like ash. His face was crimson now, beads of sweat rolling down his temple. He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, spitting the words like bullets. "You're pathetic, dragging my name through the mud because you can't stand on your own. You'll never be more than a loudmouth in Congress, a weak little warrior hiding behind your cheap theatrics." Jasmine's smile was razor thin, devastating. "You want theatrics? Look in the mirror, Mr. Trump. Every tantrum, every insult, every staged display of power, it's all theater, and you've been the clown center stage. But the audience isn't laughing anymore. They're watching the curtain fall." The blow landed like steel. Trump lurched forward, voice rising to a shriek, a sound raw enough to scrape against the walls. "You don't deserve to speak my name. You are nothing, nothing compared to me. I built towers while you begged for attention. I won elections while you were still learning to spell your own." The chamber shook with the force of his rage, but Jasmine refused to flinch. Her voice came low, steady, and lethal. "Then why are you trembling, Mr. Trump? Why is the man who claims to be untouchable shaking before the truth? Towers crumble, elections end. But your lies, they never survive the light." Her words hung in the air like a blade suspended at his throat. The crowd leaned in, breathless. Cameras flashed, capturing every line, every glare, every cut of word against word. On social media, the storm was already raging, hashtags exploding, millions tuning in live, memes and commentary pouring like a flood. The nation was no longer simply watching a hearing. It was watching a battle for its very soul. Trump, desperate, hurled insult after insult, each one louder, harsher, more unhinged than the last. "Liar, traitor, radical trash. You're a disgrace to this country. You think anyone will remember your name when I'm done with you? You'll crawl back to obscurity, forgotten, humiliated." But every strike only exposed his desperation, and Jasmine's replies grew sharper, faster, impossible to block. "Forgotten? No, Mr. Trump. I will be remembered as the woman who stood against you when you tried to silence justice, while your legacy will be remembered for corruption, cowardice, and collapse. That is the history you cannot rewrite." The chamber roared. It was no longer dialogue. It was combat. Words collided midair, clashing like swords. Each insult from Trump was parried, each accusation dismantled, each roar countered with calm ferocity. And the people, those in the room, those across the nation, were transfixed. Screens lit up in homes and cafes and offices. Every second was dissected, replayed, broadcasted into the bloodstream of America. Twitter burned with Jasmine's lines. TikTok looped her sharpest comebacks. News anchors whispered in disbelief at the raw fury unfolding live. Trump leaned so close across the desk that his spit flecked the air. His voice cracked as he screamed, "You'll regret this, Crockett! I'll destroy you! I'll destroy everything you stand for!" Jasmine's reply was delivered in a whisper so deadly it silenced the room. "No, Mr. Trump, you already destroyed yourself." The words fell like a final sentence, heavy and irreversible. The hearing room froze. For a heartbeat, even the cameras seemed to stop. And then the explosion came, not from violence, but from the roar of voices, the flood of reactions, the storm that had now consumed every corner of the nation. The duel had reached its peak. The insults had burned down to ash. And still neither warrior stepped back. It was fire against fire, steel against steel, and the outcome was written not in who shouted loudest, but in who stood unshaken. And Jasmine Crockett stood unshaken. The air inside the hearing chamber vibrated with tension, the kind that seemed to grip every chest, tighten every throat. Trump's fury still lingered in the echoes of the room, but it was brittle now, cracked at the edges. His empire of bluster was wobbling, and Jasmine knew it. She reached again into her folder, her movements deliberate, her gaze fixed like a spear. "We've seen the corruption, the deception, the greed," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "But now it's time to face the final piece, the one you cannot run from." A hush swept through the hall. Even Trump's most loyal allies leaned forward, sensing the shift. Jasmine held up a document so damning the chamber seemed to hold its breath. Behind her, the screens flickered with images, emails, bank records, sworn statements from witnesses whose voices had long been silenced. "This," she announced, "is the truth you've tried to bury. Direct orders, signed in your hand, instructing the misuse of relief funds. Testimony from those you threatened into silence. Data connecting every thread of corruption back to you. No spin, no doubt, no escape." The room erupted with gasps. Reporters scrambled, their fingers flying over keyboards, their cameras flashing like lightning. The floodgates of truth had opened, and the torrent was unstoppable. Trump's face drained of color, his lips trembling. He lurched forward, clutching the desk like a lifeline. "Lies!" he screamed, his voice hoarse. "All of it. Fabricated, twisted, witch hunt garbage. You can't prove a damn thing." But Jasmine's reply was merciless. "You keep saying witch hunt, Mr. Trump, yet here are the witches. The bankers, the aides, the contractors, each with sworn testimony, each confirming your orders. These aren't my words. They're yours, signed in ink, captured in recordings, written in the very numbers you thought could be hidden." She nodded to the back of the room. The doors opened, and one by one, witnesses stepped forward. Former associates, former allies, faces once loyal to him, now hardened with resolve. Their voices carried through the chamber, recounting stories of manipulation, threats, betrayals. Every testimony was another nail hammered into the coffin of his defense. Trump's hands shook violently now. He stammered, tried to interject, but each time his words were drowned by the relentless march of truth. Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. Her calm was more devastating than his rage. She connected the dots with surgical precision, weaving evidence and witness into a tapestry so airtight that denial became absurd. "With every lie," she said, "you thought yourself untouchable. But tonight, the truth stands taller than your towers, stronger than your threats, louder than your rage, and no amount of shouting will silence it." The chamber quaked with energy. Senators who had cowered in silence now straightened in their seats, emboldened by her resolve. Journalists exchanged looks of awe, knowing they were witnessing a turning point that would echo across history. Trump tried one last desperate gambit, his voice cracking as he pointed a shaking finger. "You think this ends me? You think you've won? The people love me. They'll never side with you." Jasmine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a quiet intensity that pierced through the roar. They don't have to side with me. They only have to side with the truth. And tonight, the truth has spoken louder than you ever could. The silence that followed was deafening. And then, like the crack of a dam finally giving way, the chamber erupted. Applause thundered through the hall, rolling like waves. Cheers rose from every corner. Even those who had wavered on the sidelines stood and clapped, their voices uniting in a roar that drowned out the last remnants of Trump's defiance. It was a sound of release, of justice long delayed but no longer denied. Trump slumped back into his chair, pale and trembling, his mouth opening and closing, but no words emerging. For the first time in memory, Donald Trump had nothing left to say. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, her expression fierce yet steady. She had not only survived the firestorm, she had turned it, wielded it, and burned through the lies until nothing remained but the truth. The hall was no longer his stage, it was hers, and the verdict was clear. Justice had won. Trump sat slumped in his chair, the fire gone from his eyes, the defiance drained from his posture. His hands, once clenched in fists of rage, now trembled aimlessly on the desk. For the first time he looked small, stripped of the armor of power, exposed under the relentless light of truth. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of a world realizing it had just shifted. All eyes turned to Jasmine Crockett. She stood tall at the center of the storm, her shoulders squared, her face illuminated by the blinding lights of the cameras. Her expression was not one of triumphal arrogance, but of unshakable conviction. She didn't need to gloat. The truth itself was her victory. Her presence filled the chamber in a way that no shouting could. She was calm. She was unbroken. She was history in motion. Across the hall, journalists pressed against each other, shouting into phones, dictating headlines in real time. Crockett crushes Trump in historic showdown. The night justices spoke. America's reckoning in a single chamber. And within minutes, those words began to flood the world. Screens lit up in every corner of the globe. From New York to Tokyo, London to Cape Town, the images blazed across televisions, phones, and computer screens. Hashtags exploded. News tickers screamed. Analysts scrambled to rewrite their scripts, their voices shaking with the magnitude of what had just unfolded. The world wasn't just watching, it was witnessing. Inside the chamber, Trump's allies shrank into their seats. Their eyes darted away from cameras, their faces pale, as if sitting beside him might stain them too. They had ridden his wave for years, but tonight that wave had crashed, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. And Trump himself, once a master of chaos, a man who thrived on turning every battle into his own theater, looked utterly defeated. His lips moved, searching for words, but only silence came out. He had built his empire on spectacle, but now, stripped of power, spectacle turned hollow. Jasmine took a slow breath, then lifted her head toward the crowd. "This was never about me," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, amplified by the stillness. It was about accountability, about truth, about proving that no one, no matter how loud, no matter how powerful, is above the people's justice. Her words echoed like bells, clear, resounding, impossible to ignore. The audience rose to its feet, applause swelling until it shook the very walls. The chamber became an arena of history, every clap a declaration that the tide had turned. And yet through it all, Jasmine remained composed. Her eyes didn't shine with vanity. They burned with purpose. This wasn't just a battle won. It was a message sent to every leader, every figure who thought power made them untouchable. Trump sat frozen, as though the very gravity of the moment had shackled him. For decades, he had commanded attention. Tonight, he could not command even his own breath. The cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of his defeat, his sweat, his trembling hands, his hollow stare. And in sharp contrast, they caught Jasmine's steady gaze, her figure framed like a statue carved into the annals of justice. The contrast was brutal. The fallen titan, the rising guardian. Already outside the chamber, crowds gathered. Screens in Times Square lit up with live feeds. In Los Angeles, cars honked in celebration. In Berlin, in Seoul, in Rio de Janeiro, The same headline rippled, "The Battle of Justice, Trump Brought Down." Social media became a storm. Memes, hashtags, videos of Jasmine's words cutting through Trump's denials spread like wildfire. Clips of her calm dismantling of his defense hit tens of millions of views within hours. The phrase, "no one is above the truth," trended worldwide. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was culture. It was history. Trump's legacy, built on noise, spectacle, and dominance, was unraveling in real time, live streamed to billions. And Jasmine Crockett's name was etched into the moment as the one who stood, who endured, who struck the blow that ended the illusion of invincibility. Back inside, the chamber's applause finally quieted, replaced by an overwhelming stillness. Jasmine turned one last time toward Trump, not with scorn, not with cruelty, but with the quiet, devastating power of someone who had already won. "You had every chance to come clean," she said softly, her words carrying even in the hush. "But you chose lies, and lies, in the end, always collapse." Trump lowered his gaze. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at anyone. The gavel slammed. The session adjourned. But the echoes of the night would never fade. For this was no ordinary clash. It was a defining moment, and the world would forever remember it as the battle where justice finally stood taller than fear. Trump rose slowly from his seat, not with the bravado of a man ready to fight again, but with the heavy shuffle of defeat. His eyes, once so practiced in dominance, darted helplessly around the chamber. No cheers, no applause, no loyalty met him now. Only silence and the unrelenting gaze of history. He turned, shoulders slumped, dragging himself toward the exit. The cameras followed his every step, capturing the image that would define the end of an era. The once mighty figure of power, retreating in shadows, dwarfed by the weight of truth. Every flashbulb immortalized the scene. Headlines began to write themselves in real time. Trump retreats in disgrace. The end of a reign built on lies. But in the same moment, as he faded into the darkness, Jasmine Crockett stepped forward into the light. The contrast was almost poetic. She emerged from the chamber as if rising from the very heart of justice itself, her figure framed by the blaze of spotlights, her steps steady and unyielding. The crowd outside erupted into thunderous applause, a tidal wave of voices chanting her name, chanting for truth, chanting for justice. The sound rolled like a storm, shaking the ground beneath the marble steps. Jasmine lifted her chin, not smiling, not basking in the glory, but carrying it with the gravity it deserved. She raised a single hand in acknowledgement, and the roar doubled, echoing through the night sky. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust like arrows, but she didn't speak immediately. She let the voices of the people rise first, let their energy fill the air. Only when silence returned, reverent and eager, did she address the world. "This victory is not mine," she said, her voice clear, unwavering, resonating through every speaker and broadcast. "It belongs to every citizen who believes that truth matters. It belongs to every person who dares to speak out, even when silence feels safer. It belongs to the future we are all responsible to protect." Her words rang out like a hymn. On social media, streams of her speech were clipped and shared, spreading like wildfire. Within minutes, her voice reached across continents. Crowds gathered in plazas, in living rooms, in cafes, glued to screens that carried her message. "This is not just about a man who tried to place himself above justice," she continued. "It is about proving that courage, no matter how small it begins, can grow to move mountains. That the truth, no matter how long it is buried, will always rise." Tears welled in the eyes of some who listened. Others raised their fists. Entire streets filled with chants of "Justice! Justice! Justice!" Trump's retreat was forgotten. The spotlight belonged entirely to Jasmine now. She was no longer just a congresswoman, no longer just a challenger in a heated hearing. She had become a symbol of resistance, of courage, of the indestructible power of honesty. The night pulsed with energy. Car horns blared in celebration. Fireworks crackled in distant neighborhoods. Strangers embraced in joy. The battle inside the chamber had ended, but its resonance was only beginning. Analysts on television called it the turning point of a generation. Historians whispered that it would be studied for decades. Children stayed awake past their bedtimes, watching with wide eyes as their parents whispered, "Remember this night. You'll tell it to your children someday." And Jasmine, standing in the center of it all, felt the weight, but also the promise. She had not sought glory, but she had fought for truth. And the world, weary of deception, had embraced her as its voice. The lights of the cameras glittered like stars around her, but it wasn't the machinery of media that crowned her. It was the people, their chants, their hope, their belief that justice had not only spoken, but triumphed. Behind her, the chamber doors closed with finality. The echoes of Trump's retreat faded into silence. Before her stretched a new horizon. The night air carried the chant of thousands, rising and falling like a heartbeat. "Crockett, justice, courage." She paused, letting the moment wash over her, then spoke her final words of the night. "Tonight, we prove that truth cannot be silenced. Tomorrow, we will prove it again and again, until justice is not just a battle we fight, but the air we breathe." The roar of the people answered her, louder than ever. It was not just an ending, it was a beginning, and the echoes of that night, the night when truth rose unbreakable and fearless, would blaze forever in history's memory as a radiant finale to a war for justice. In the end, the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump was more than a battle of words. It was a reminder that truth is fragile only when silence protects the lie. Justice is not born from power, but from courage, the courage to stand, to speak, to endure the storm when others would bow. And if we carry that courage within ourselves, then every home, every street, every nation can become a chamber where truth prevails and humanity walks a little taller. If this battle moved you, don't just click away. Hold it, share it, let it spark a conversation at your table. Like, comment, and send it to someone who still believes justice belongs to the people. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where the powerful are challenged and the truth never whispers. Hit the bell, because the next story won't comfort you. It will confront you, and it might just change how you see justice itself. This tale is a dramatization, born from real corruption and real courage. Any likeness to actual figures is intentional, symbolic for reflection and critique. Thank you for watching. Justice doesn't wait. It rises when we do. This is Harrison Stories.